Hello and welcome to What's the Move? That went on a little bit longer than I planned, but now that the New Year is upon us, it's kind of appropriate to talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens. I think this is a video I would preferably like to have uploaded, say, a week, maybe 2 weeks ago to align with the film's release. But the fact of the matter is, I wanted a film of this scale, whether it's the hype, whether it's the size, whether it's the massive and incredibly successful box office performance the film has. I wanted all of that to sink in for a moment, to really let us have a breather so that cooler minds to some degree can prevail and really view the film, in my personal opinion as well, view the film for what it is. Now, I'm going to preface this video by saying I really like The Force Awakens, but I'm sure you know where this is going, that it is a very problematic film in my opinion, and I don't think by any stretch of the word it's a great film. I think it's a good movie, but I tend to see it on the top of these, best film of 2015, best movie of all time kind of rave reactions. And while I'm not discounting anyone's opinion and I'm saying, everyone's entitled to their own, I feel like there may be, this is my theory, there may be this essence of whether it's nostalgia, whether it's hype, whether there are blinders being worn to really love this film for the sake of loving it. That's something I'm not entirely for. I will acknowledge a film, whether I'm excited for it or not, based on its pros and its cons, its flaws and its greatness. And I do believe that The Force Awakens has a lot to love, and I can see people really enjoying it, but I do believe that there's a lot that holds it back. I can, of course, acknowledge the beauty of what is the best part of this film, the new characters. I think everyone from John Boyega to Daisy Ridley, Oscar Isaac, even BB-8 had so much personality. There is this impeccable sense of chemistry amongst the characters that I don't think we've ever seen in a Star Wars film before. This is, in fact, the first Star Wars film, I think, where the characters and the actors and the performances have really been not just at the forefront, but perhaps the best part of the film. Somewhat shocking, somewhat great to see something new, of course, but even Kylo Ren and his character alone, he's a very insecure man, and might I add that there may be some spoilers through the course of this video. His insecurity is something that kind of made me feel a little off at first, but really understanding it and really letting it come to fruition later on. Him, basically in his grandfather's shadow, trying to be the best he can, trying to suck up to Snoke to some degree, really is something that adds a lot of complexity to the characters, and there is a lot set up in the film. And yes, I understand it is the beginning of a trilogy. Yes, I understand it is coming off another trilogy. It's a sequel, but the new stuff is great. What's weird is that the old stuff, which I think they really felt the need to throw in, is some of the stuff that I didn't particularly enjoy. Now, of course, I can view it as part of the saga and say there's far too many parallels. There's far too many parallels to A New Hope, and it really making me sick after a point. I thought that the most basic general storyline itself had a lot of similarities, this kind of poetry and whatnot, if you will, to the original Star Wars that came out in '77. However, even some of the execution of those moments, I believe, was not done even as well back then. I felt like today, say you have more technology, you have a little more space to work with, there's certain moments from there that you could pick up, take inspiration from, and really do a better job of, or, present in a better way. But I feel like things like, for example, Starkiller Base, destroying those 5 planets, it's a very minor moment in the film just to show the force, well, no pun intended, but the force of the First Order. But this sense of destruction, this large scale of destruction that occurs throughout the film, whether Starkiller Base, whether 5 planets being destroyed, I never really felt any of it. I never really felt this sense of possible despair for any of the new characters I was attached to, and the ones that they really did focus on. The old characters I do understand, yes, there's their possibility of going away and whatnot, and that did make me wonder and make me a little bit fearful, of course. Characters like Oscar Isaac, John Boyega, everyone really well introduced, but beyond that, I felt like Rey had a lot of development. The other characters didn't have an awful lot to do apart from play off in one another. They did somewhat exude a lot of modernistic language, if you will, and a really modern touch to this film that I liked, simply by the way they speak, whether it's the word boyfriend thrown in by John Boyega in one scene, to really give you this flavor of the new. But the film has this urge to constantly retread and retread and retread, whether it's going to a cantina, whether it's blowing up Starkiller Base. That just made me feel like, yeah, you know, okay, I felt like there's a lot more potential in this film that could have been done. And yes, there are 2 more installments to come, but within this simple story alone, there's a lot more they could have done with the new. But this urge to look at the old over and over again, to tell almost the entire original trilogy's tale in this one story, in this one film itself, cramming a lot more than it should have, really made it feel like they were rushing through things. I think as the film went on, those first 10 or 15 minutes or so, it took me a moment to adapt. Of course, the opening crawl really did set things up well for this story, but I was trying to adapt to it, not just in terms of, you know, the new settings, the new characters, but this fine line between old and new that it jumps, even the aesthetic, and that's another issue I have with the film somewhat. Certain bits of, you know, say character moments, deep moments, are presented in such an amazing visual way. Like, for example, they show Rey's character, you know, sitting at the foot of an AT-AT on Jakku, even the fluffing of her bread, something so simple, something just to show the kind of life she's living, and that abruptly jumping to these incredibly weirdly designed shots of raptors and all of that, just making it feel a little off, and making it feel very inconsistent and jarring after a point visually, to say the least. Something I'm not sure a lot of people have addressed, but something that certainly did affect me to a great degree, for that matter. But really, even this whole idea that I still remember people had back in the day, talking about, ooh, practical effects, it's going to be so great, it's going to be awesome, and practical effects are the best thing. That's something I felt like, sure, you know, practical effects when combined with CGI can be great. I don't think one necessarily trumps the other. You could say Mad Max was mostly practical. Well, to a large degree, yes, there still was a lot of CGI used in that film, but they did that great. You could talk about The Force Awakens. There's a lot of moments where the visual effects, in my opinion, really just don't live up. Not just to 2015 standards, but even to what they managed to pull off in 1977. I mean, simple things like the appearance of Emperor Snoke, just something that made me feel detached from the film and further away from the film. Whether it's the blowing up and this massive scale of destruction towards the end, whether it's Starkiller Base and whatnot, really didn't appeal to me from a visual perspective. And after a point, I felt like J.J. Abrams, he managed to do well with the actors, but there's a certain visual sense. While he expanded it, while visually he did things that other Star Wars films have not. You look at the last shot, that kind of circular thing, an absolutely gorgeous shot that I'll get to in a moment. He did still boil Star Wars down to what I believe is a more standard sci-fi film to some degree, in terms of the visual representation of the film. While I'm not going to deny the beauty of Rey's character arc in this, or even John Boyega's interesting character arc, there's a lot of interesting things set up, but they're not put too much at the forefront as they should be, like I said, for the sake of doing the old. And I think that's the biggest problem that the film really has, is this worry, this real worry that it needs to be such a crowd pleaser. And I could look at Jurassic World as well, a film that was undoubtedly so successful, came out earlier this year, in fact, one of the most successful films of all time. I define that as a crowd pleaser. I define The Force Awakens as a crowd pleaser as well. A crowd pleaser, why? Yes, I would recommend it to literally everyone. However, I'm going to come in as somewhat of a film fan and say this, and this could be a very controversial statement, I understand, but the fact of the matter is, pretty much most of the films that end up being more beloved, you could look at The Dark Knight, you could look at The Godfather, you could look at even the original Star Wars for that matter. They took, I would say, more risks. They dared to say something, they dared to do something different, and thereby did accumulate a certain section of haters, a certain section of people that did not like the film. However, I do believe in the sole purpose of being safe. There was this idea of having to make the safe decisions, not do anything particularly outside of the box, and really deliver what could have been something, in my opinion, again, far more fantastic, far more exciting, far more fresh and original than what we got. It was just merely done for the sake of being safe. I understand that based on how the Star Wars saga has really flown over the years, but that doesn't really let me give it a pass for my simple understanding of it. And one more thing I'd like to address about the film is, sure, as those first 15 minutes, as I did address earlier, it took me time to adjust to it. There was a lot of excitement when Rey and Finn met. There was a lot of excitement, but then when you get to the Falcon and beyond that, I felt like I just wanted to see where it was going next. I didn't know where it was going next, and that's not a way of me saying that I need to know everything, but there didn't seem to be any sense of direction towards the middle. I felt like it was just a trek that was going along and taking its time, and really just a long trek to get to what I believe were those most fantastic 40 minutes. Probably the best 40 minutes I've seen a film all year. Left me on the highest of fucking notes it could ever have, but getting there was a trek, and I believe for the reasons I did mention that Star Wars is a good film. Star Wars The Force Awakens is a good film. I do not believe, as I mentioned earlier, it is a great film. I don't think it is even close to perfect. In terms of the saga, it ranks somewhere in the middle. It's definitely not the best in my opinion. There was a lot more that could have been done. There was a lot more. I'm going to say there was a lot more I expected, but I rarely do I allow my expectations to really play into the film, nor do I let nostalgia play into it either. So it's kind of, a back and forth, kind of two sides of a coin. And I try and leave those things behind when I go into a film. Even then, this film did have some potential that wasn't exacted out. It gets me both excited and scared for the next installment. Excited that, okay, now that they're done setting up, now that they're done being safe, they could do risky things. Flip side to that, is this the kind of direction they want to take by doing a lot of the same? I don't know yet. I won't find out till May 2017. But until then, if you're going to ask me the question, what is the move? And of course, if I spoil the film for you, I do apologize. I did warn you earlier, but I would still say that this is a film worth watching. There's no doubt about it. I think that The Force Awakens is a good movie. That's why I say I can recommend it to literally anyone, because someone or the other will get something out of this film. But whether it is the thing, whether it is a lot of things, whether it is the best thing, that is beyond questionable. And without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, I'm going to say it is not the thing. You will get a thing. You will enjoy the film. But when you ask me what the move is, still definitely go watch it. It's Star Wars. You're going to have a great fucking time.